All right, good morning. Good morning, welcome to session 1 of the all-new Combating Homelessness track. I'm Cindy Stotler, I'm the Deputy Director at the Arizona Department of Housing. I will be moderating this session along with Sherry Boucher over here, Program Administrator for the Arizona Department of Housing. She'll be monitoring the virtual track for this. This session is titled Affordable Housing Initiatives. We're starting the new homeless track with an affordable housing discussion because it's a key factor in addressing homelessness. We currently estimate a housing shortage of over 250,000 units statewide. The overall housing shortage in Arizona is driving up rental and home prices, and you've all seen that in the news over and over again in the last year or so. Many low-income and even moderate-income households are so cost-burdened now with housing prices that one unexpected bill, cut in work hours, cut in pay, can cause them to lose their housing and become homeless. The most current point in time count in 2020 showed just under 10,000 unsheltered homeless throughout the state. And most of you listening who are in the business know that the housing shortage makes it very, very difficult to find available housing for these folks, even with rental assistance like Section 8 vouchers. And on top of all of that, land and construction costs are rising too, making it almost impossible to finance affordable housing. But there's a positive side to all this, and that's why we're here today. In this session, we'll hear about innovative policy initiatives that cities have adopted to create more housing options for incentivizing and increasing affordable housing in their jurisdictions. We'll hear from Titus Matthew, the Housing Director at the City of Phoenix, who will highlight housing information and policy initiatives from the Housing Phoenix Plan. And LaVon Lammy, Human Services Director, our Human Services Manager from the City of Tempe, will tell us about Tempe's Hometowns for All plan. And last, Irma Hollenby, Manager of Community Assistance for the City of Scottsdale, will provide insight about Scottsdale's affordable housing policy journey. This session is both live and virtual. So before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to allow each speaker to complete their presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end of the presentation. I'm going to ask our virtual attendees to submit their questions in the chat box, and Sherry will ask them of the speaker when we end the presentation. And then for those of you who are live, we have a microphone right in the center of a room. We elected because of COVID not to pass a mic around so no one's touching this microphone. So if you just come up and ask your question at the standing mic, that will work for us. So with that, first up is Titus Matthew and the Housing Phoenix Plan. Welcome, Titus.
Well, thank you, Cindy. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Good morning. The Housing Phoenix Plan was actually approved by the City Council of Phoenix in June of 2020. So part of the Housing Phoenix Plan was a major component of the plan was a completion of gap analysis that was done to check the stock of Phoenix in terms of housing units needed. And currently Phoenix has a need for 163,000 units, and it's a substantial number, of which 63,000 are regular market rate units and 99,000 are for the affordable and subsidized units that are needed. And of the 99,000, approximately 9,000 units are needed for seniors, 5,000 for veterans, 9,000 for persons with disabilities, and 2,300 for persons with unsheltered or experiencing homelessness. This gap helped the staff tell a story to council and sought feedback in terms of support on policy initiatives that were needed to move the needle forward for Phoenix. This slide represents to show you the housing production and the population growth in Phoenix since 1990. Sorry. Move too fast. There you go. Sorry about that. As the fastest growing city for the 5th year in a row, Phoenix has population, as the population continues to increase, the housing market has not grown as well at the same rate. And the population demands are outweighing the housing needs. resulting in overall housing shortage. This shortage is due to the underproduction of housing over the past several decades. As you can see, from 1990 to 2018, there's a significant difference of what the need is versus what we have. And the next slide I want to show you is showing the costs rising faster than the income levels present in Phoenix. I'm sure this is the case nationally as well. If you look at this slide, you see the income has gone up 10%, rent prices 28%, and home prices 57%. This scarcity has caused housing costs to rise faster than most residents' income growth. Between 2010 and 2018, Phoenix median income increased by 10%, while median rent increased by 28%, and home prices went over 57%. So you can see the gap is significant, and I'm not sure. The idea is, we all know we need more of housing, and for Phoenix, it is to create 50,000 units by 2030. This slide represents a visual to show you, based on area median income and income levels of our residents in Phoenix, of what is happening today. It helps paint a picture of a variety of household types and who within our current market can afford to rent or own a home in our community. For example, average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,300. It's just affordable for the single parent household at 80% of AMI, or area median income. According to Zillow, the current median home price in Phoenix is $360,000. The only income level that can afford to purchase a median price home are families that make above 120% of AMI, which is $94,000 for a family of 4. So there is a gap and there's a problem. As I mentioned, the Phoenix City Council, in a majority vote, in fact, unanimous vote, agreed to this plan last year. And then we have a goal by 2030 to create 50,000 homes, which is a significant goal for first time for the city of Phoenix. I think a great plan indeed. The first policy initiative, we're going to talk about 4 initiatives of the 9. And the first one is to prioritize new housing in areas of opportunity. An important finding of the Housing Phoenix plan was that the city needs to prioritize housing near important areas such as transit corridors, quality education, employment opportunities, healthcare, and much more. Through this initiative, we have developed an objective scoring mechanism. Staff are currently working to map location using GIS. Once finalized, this will be used for housing projects seeking city approval to objectively communicate the benefits of having housing at selected locations. The second initiative will amend current zoning ordinances to facilitate more housing options. And this is one of our challenging initiatives because we have to work with multiple departments in zoning, the village planning commissions, as well as councils, as well as city council. In order to accommodate the number of units we need in Phoenix, housing types outside of traditional multifamily and single-family options. To do this, we'll have to amend zoning ordinances to incentivize affordable housing and allow for additional uses like ADUs or accessory dwelling units, such as what LA is doing. Affordable housing incentives would be provided to developers if they build affordable housing or pay into an affordable housing fund, like the state manages. This would help generate non-federal funds for affordable housing for Phoenix, which will be a first if we get this done. The third policy initiative is to redevelop city-owned land with mixed income housing. Into this, the city has identified and set aside over 140 parcels of land for future development or redevelopment of mixed income housing. These parcels will be released over the next 5 years through a variety of RFPs or requests for proposals, working with different community groups to do this. This is an example of a project that Newtown Partners is doing, and it's called Rosewood Court. The third initiative is to expand efforts to preserve existing housing stock. And the way we're going to do this is through different criteria like strategic acquisitions. This strategy allows the city to seek out new opportunities to purchase land for future growth or to build affordable housing and mixed income housing. This last year, the city purchased its first property using the strategy using CDBG funds. The parcel was located in downtown Phoenix and will help create much needed affordable and mixed income housing in this high cost area. The second one within that initiative is the Community Land Trust. Now, this is something where we've not done in Phoenix before, as far as I know, but this strategy reduces the cost of home ownership by placing land in a trust, only requiring the home buyer to mortgage the amount needed to purchase the home. The model also creates a sustainable mechanism for the long-term affordable home ownership. The city has executed a pilot for the city's first Community Land Trust through Newtown and our Pride Board entity, which is a nonprofit partnering with the City of Phoenix Housing. Sorry. And then finally, we have the last two items I want to talk about is the landlord incentives. September of 2020, the city used CARES funds to initiate a $500,000 incentive program for Section 8 landlords. And this is for existing landlords and any new landlords coming to the program. Currently, the program has been very successful, and we have received over 113 new landlords to the program, which is a first for the city of Phoenix, and we have never received that kind of success before. And in September, I'm going to council to talk about the council providing an additional $1 million to continue the program. So that's something we're looking at. We're hoping to grow that program and to increase landlord participation in the city of Phoenix. I think it's been successful for us. And I know other cities in the surrounding neighborhoods have been looking to do something similar as well. Finally, we're also expanding a rental rehab program, which through our neighborhood services department, which is offering rental rehab assistance funded with CDBG. This program offers up to $40,000 per unit to help preserve affordable housing in areas that are subject to displacement. And that is the end of my presentation. And thank you.
Thank you, Titus. So full disclosure, I was the housing director at the city of Phoenix when we created this Housing Phoenix plan. And I think it was the most shocking when we went to council to talk about housing production versus population growth and why we have such a significant housing shortage. I think the other shocking number was the number of units we were short just overall. So, we're short market rate units. We were short affordable housing units and, all across the board. So I think it was important to communicate to our city council and I think statewide to other city councils that, we need to be understanding that we need to build more housing, market rate and affordable. We need all kinds of housing because we're so short on all units across the board. So thank you, Titus. I appreciate that. We can open up for questions now. Anybody have any questions? It might be a little intimidating to stand up at the microphone and ask questions, but we are open for questions. Anybody? Yes.
So what they do is for landlords, they get $500 for every HAP contract they sign. So whether it's an existing landlord or a new landlord. So as long as a new HAP agreement is in place, you give out $500.
So I have a question, Titus. So, this was passed by council in June of 2020, you said. So have you hit any snags? Because it wasn't unanimously passed by council. They were all excited about this. But then the reality hits when you're trying to actually implement. So did you hit any snags?
Yes. Some snags come along the way. So all the initiatives that I think will be difficult to manage and move forward is the zoning changes required and the amendments that are needed for more affordable housing and NIMBYism. So interesting enough, one of our council members met with me and wants to champion the education campaign. So she wants to be part of the educational media or campaign in itself to talk about this because she experienced this as far as her daughter couldn't find affordable housing in where she lived. So she now knows it's a real problem in Phoenix. So yes, so I think the zoning and the text amendments and the variances we would need are going to be the most challenging going forward.
And those are the most needed
Yes.
to actually make housing happen. That's, and, you know, one of the struggles with an education campaign, I think also is that the general public, you know, across the board recognizes that we need more housing, that we need more dense housing, and that, you know, they want to help the homeless and they want to provide housing to the homeless. And so everybody is generally supportive when you do an education campaign, but when it comes to the exact project in your neighborhood, that's where we run into the issues, and that's the challenge. So
I've been told already that we cannot model Minnesota. So in Phoenix. So that's what's going to be. So they said, whatever happened in Minneapolis is not going to happen in Phoenix. So that's like, they don't want only high density or multifamily homes in housing in Phoenix.
So no drastic moves
Yes,
like
yes.
eliminating single family zoning,
Yes.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So that's one of the challenges.
any other questions? Yes.
So my question, I'm Brad Bridwell with Collaborate Communities, and in digging on the housing plan, you know, the 50,000 unit goal is fantastic. But much of it, about 2/3 of it, is really market driven and requires no city of Phoenix inertia or energy. You know, we're seeing mostly what it was naturally occurring affordable housing becoming workforce, being tracked by a category of how much it costs. The market rate development, well, market's going to supply because the demand is there and they'll move in that direction. So I'm curious what the specific goal is towards affordable housing development and how that is in excess of what would normally be able to be achieved. And then my second piece is on the ADUs. I think the ADUs is a great strategy. We have 1 million in these historic districts, especially in Phoenix, of lots of accessory units that aren't called ADUs because they're single family zoned. And so they're permitted as storage sheds, as gyms, as pool houses, as anything but a livable unit. And we also already know we're already challenged with those getting rented out on Airbnb and creating very unaffordable conditions. Have you given consideration to using, I know you've got some pilot ideas out there, but using an ADU overlay that is actually tied to your rental rehab program so that you're touching it with affordable dollars and you can actually deed restrict those housings without lifting single family zoning, but allowing a homeowner who wants to come up to that new standard and rent their units out affordably. You know, have you given consideration to tying all of that together? And so first question, just on the actual city inertia around affordable housing, what does that goal look like inside of the 50,000? Because right now it just appears you can meet the 50,000 by letting the market do what the market does. So those are my two-part questions.
So to answer your first part, I think the city council is very proactive in understanding that we have a housing problem in Phoenix, especially in affordable housing. So we have received, like most entities have, our funds, our American Rescue Plan and CARES funds. And in fact, the housing department has got $21 million in home funds. We're hoping to do some gap financing or other things, a combination of different things. We haven't decided or come to conclusions yet because we're going to be going out to the community stakeholders and nonprofits and the various entities to get a discussion started as to what or where the biggest need for that funding goes. So a lot of the entities that I've met with so far have talked about gap financing, but I don't think gap financing alone is going to happen based on what council directive or direction is. But that's, and they really understand that we have to have more affordable housing because in Phoenix, one of the challenges we're having is a lot of market rate apartment complexes or housing is coming up, but not affordable housing or workforce housing. So what do we do to get there? So one of the challenges is we're talking there's a talk going on at the moment. I'm not sure where it's going to go. But we're going to receive $200 million next year from the American Rescue Plan towards the city. And they're talking about setting aside some monies within that pot of money for more affordable housing. And what that looks like, what that's going to entail, at this point, I do not know. It could be giving it out on a call for interest or request for proposals, or for more gap financing, or to rehab existing affordable housing, or a combination of different factors. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like because we're still talking about it. So that's, to answer your first part of the question, that's where the city is going with this, because a lot of the council members understand now that affordable housing and the crisis, or the lack thereof, is a big problem for Phoenix. And even its own employees cannot afford to buy homes or rent homes in Phoenix. So that's a challenge. As far as your second part of your question about zoning with ADUs, and so we're talking to the planning department currently, and we also talking to VPCs. And currently, I'm also short staff. So we just onboarding new staff and hope to get new staff the next few months. But that's a topic of conversation. We'll have to go to council at some point and work with planning to do some, like on the ADUs, we're considering a pilot program in certain districts to see how that'll work for the community, and also give an education to council to see if they will accept this going forward, and is that going to be implemented across the city. So that's where we are with that.
Okay, well, I'm a Coronado historic resident, and I'll offer my neighborhood. We've got hundreds and hundreds of ADUs, and will happily be your volunteer champion to put the neighborhood together on that. A lot of people are out in support of it. We need the ability to do it. We don't have the right to do it. And it's frustrating for the community and homeowners, and who aren't, we don't want to participate in gentrification, but we know we are, right? And so what I'm more concerned about in this plan is, what is the city doing on each level that it controls to create inertia, more so than, what's the federal government going to bring down, or what can we pull from this market rate development to put into a little fund and things of that nature, but our actual structural elements. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and also just so the council is also contemplating creating a housing trust fund. We started a pilot, we received $100,000 so far, but that's not enough to do anything with a bang in Phoenix. But that's a policy discussion that's going to come up in the future to talk about what Phoenix needs to do to create a proper housing fund and how to capitalize it as well.
Yeah, just encourage as we go forward with the city that we look at not, what are the feds going to do for us, but what's the city going to do for itself. That should be the vein, right? So thank you.
Okay.
And then, Brad, just to answer your first question, among the 50,000, I think we did have to set goals. Sherry Boucher actually wrote the Housing Phoenix plan sitting over here. We had to give them goals for market, affordable, and workforce, I believe. So the council did ask for that. So it's not just any housing unit. They wanted a certain number of affordable units. And she started tracking that for reporting. So I know we did develop that. So,
Yeah, we've been on call.
Okay. So you asked a question, you already knew the answer. Okay. Yes.
First, let me just say thank you for your commitment and the city of Phoenix's commitment to affordable housing. It is most appreciated. I'm responsible for REBA housing across the northern 6 counties. And I also serve on the, let me just make it easier, and also serve on the Home Matters to Arizona Governing Board. And I fully recognize the challenge of trying to expand affordable housing in terms of the number of units because of the capital costs and the amount of time it takes to happen. So one of the things that we've been looking at is home sharing. We're looking at how that can be organized, and organizations like Silver Nest, which have very complex matching algorithms to put the right people together with the right people. And it solves 2 problems. One, it provides affordable housing to people who need it. It also provides relief from social isolationism for people who are living alone and could use another person in the house. I'm curious about whether the city of Phoenix is looking at doing anything to support home sharing initiatives.
I'm not familiar with any home sharing initiatives currently in Phoenix, but I know there's a complex coming up right next to City Hall in Phoenix. That's modeled that type of model where you have a bedroom or a unit that has 4 bedrooms with 4 strangers could live in. So that's a new concept that is happening in downtown Phoenix, but I'm not sure yet in terms of affordable housing, if that's going to happen anytime soon, or we have any projects that are currently in place.
Yeah, I just, what I would say is the advantage of that kind of a system is there's no capital cost. It provides income and relief from social isolation for especially seniors who are living alone. And it's something that if we could find a way to come together with and organize statewide, we might be able to significantly move the needle on affordable housing without spending any additional capital.
So just to answer to one follow-up point to your question is, one of the things I'm looking at in Phoenix is under Section 8 program. We're working with HUD currently to see if residents or clients of Section 8 vouchers can rent a unit or a bedroom within a household. And can that be their residence within? And that's something we're trying to figure out because the lack of housing available to Section 8 participants, we're looking at that option currently.
Any other questions? Sherry, are there any questions from the virtual track? No questions? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to Levon.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Levon Lamy. I manage housing services for the city of Tempe. And just so that everyone has a little context for the city of Tempe, when we're talking housing services, that is the Public Housing Authority, that is the Federal Entitlement Program, CDBG, Home, ESG. So the majority of the federal funds coming, not majority, almost all of the federal funds coming out of the federal government through HUD flow through housing services, and we're able to, kind of corral and coordinate all of those funds and keep them all moving in one direction so that we have that compounding impact. As part of the Hometown for All and chatting about and understanding what the Hometown for All initiative is for the city of Tempe and the impact it's had, we have to do a little bit of a history lesson just so that we can all make sure that we're on the same page with all of the groundwork that went into that before mayor and council approved it. So starting in 2017, our mayor and council began hearing more and more about affordable housing, the lack of affordable housing, and started a council work group and said, let's take a look at what we're doing with affordable housing. How much do we have? What exactly do we know? And it kind of took off from there. So we started our initial housing inventory. We literally hired a consulting company to go out and count houses, literally and figuratively on the computer. How many single families do we have? How many multifamilies do we have? How many duplexes? How many triplexes? What is the price point at each of these for the home ownership? What is the price point at each of these for the rental options? What are being used as single family rentals versus multifamily rentals in a shared housing model? That in and of itself took about a year to figure out every single unit that at that time we had in Tempe that was a fully permitted dwelling unit. What we ended up with was the bottom line that when we had established our inventory, standardized our definitions of what affordable means, right, wrong, or indifferent, at least within Tempe. What does affordable mean? What does workforce mean? And what does market mean? So that we were all having the same conversation. When I said affordable housing, they knew it was 80% or below. When council asked me to look at workforce housing, I knew they meant 81 to 120. And if we were talking market, well, that was 121 and above. So that we were very clear what our definitions were, what we were working with. And from there, based on that, we established, they established a citywide strategic priority based on our housing inventory. At that time, 49.3% of all housing units in Tempe were available to the 80% and below affordables. Workforce 81 to 120, 34.2% of all work units, ownership and rental, were available to workforce. 16.5% were for 120% area median income and above. So from there, the goal was set, and it was a little bit of an aspirational goal. What do we need to do to maintain these blends? Do we have a shortage of units in the 0 to 50 AMIs? Yeah, we do. The inventory showed us we had 16,285 more units that we needed. But on the whole, just under half of the city was available to 80% and below. So we were really able to start focusing on where does LIHTC come in? Where does the IDA come in? Where does the housing authority come in? And where do we really need to, as a municipality, as a public housing authority, and as entitlement programs, focus and really drive that? Well, it was the 50% and below, because that's where we had the most impact and there were the fewest resources, and that's the hardest to get in. We also set up a cycle for renewed inventories so that we know what we're doing and what our houses are doing. Every 5 years, timed with our consolidated plans, we do a full inventory. Every year we have a minor update done just to make sure, nothing major's happened. Let's pick up any new developments that have come in, any new, sorts of occupancy that might massage the numbers. But on a citywide, 2 new apartment complexes at 200 units coming online, it's not going to change my percentages. On a 5-year, we'll have more units come in to where we can look at that. When we did our current, which has not been finalized yet, we're working through some specifics, but from 2017 to 2020, looking at our current inventory, we were able to maintain. Our percentages did not significantly change. Did our workforce go from, I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but did it go from 34 to 33? Actually, it did. Did market rate go from 16 to 17? I think that's the correct number. But on an overall significance, that was there. And how do we maintain this blend moving into the future? And I can also say with the current inventory and analysis, we had 10-year projections done based on what the city is doing now. And we all know how projections are, one little hiccup and the whole world falls apart. If all of our projections hold, in 10 years, we will still be able to maintain our rough housing blend of affordable workforce and market based on everything that the city is doing now, including the Hometown for All initiative, which, is kind of, for us, that's a big deal. And we are definitely planning on compounding impacts as we have these units moving forward. So the other thing, as part of this entire conversation and the city's goal to let's work to maintain our blend, and what do we need to do? We definitely had some changes in philosophy when it came to putting CDBG funds or home funds into projects, negotiating those affordability periods from not having a base to a minimum opening discussion of we're going to need a 15-year minimum affordability period. Let's look at this. Looking at the city properties that are appropriate for housing development, we're not going to sell them. We're not going to transfer title. We're going to hold title. We'll do a 60-year, we kind of started the 60-year land lease. We'll do a 60-year land lease. At the end of the 60 years, let's renegotiate what's happening with this property. Is it still appropriate for a 200-unit multifamily building that's 60 years old? Do we need to scrape it? And because we're 60 years down the road, now it's a 25-story, 2,000-unit building. I don't know. 60 years from now, I'll be in my dotage. But it provides the opportunity to replace that unit and still have control of the dirt. One of the core realities that at least we were working with as we were trying to put all this together is with Tempe, we have plus or minus 40 square miles. And since we haven't figured out how to make more dirt yet, we're kind of sticking to that 40 square mile plus or minus. And how do we do that and maintain those properties? Long-term development, long-term lease, we're not transferring the title, and we're impressing covenants on your land lease. It has to be affordable. You get to see my bright smiling face every year when I come out to do your monitoring and make sure you're in compliance with your covenants. Again, standardized conversations, housing. human services, community development, economic development, all getting on the same page, making sure that we're talking, well, we all speak different languages, and one thing means something to me and it means something else to them. But at least when we're having these conversations, shared definitions and understanding what we're looking at doing and where we're going. Because we have zoning issues we have to look at. We have land use restrictions. We've got different little things that I don't entirely understand, but we've got the folks in the room that understand those inside and out so that we can work through and find that negotiated middle ground to move these projects forward. So again, assist with the development. We also set up as part of this affordable housing strategy. We Tempe at that time were an HCV only housing authority. We did not have any public housing, voucher only, completely dependent upon the whims of the market and what the market does. We set up an affiliate nonprofit of the housing authority so that we could have a base amount of permanently affordable rental housing. Can't do rent control. We all know that. We can only restrict so many properties. And even, with a lot of city support, there's only so much money to buy dirt to build housing. So how do we leverage these things to, again, work on that compounding impact? Working with the consultant, nonprofit affiliate of the housing authority to hold and property manage these single-family dwelling units, apartment complexes, or dirt lots that are going to be built upon to be able to maintain that, impress the covenants, and work towards. All in, it took us from 2017 to July 31st of 2019 to come up with an affiliate of the housing authority, nonprofit, and an affordable housing strategy document that kind of set the mission and vision of the city as it relates to us working with our housing goals, affordable workforce and market. It was intentionally designed as plus or minus 20 independent strategies. Depending on how you read the strategy, I see 20, some people see 19, but plus or minus 20 strategies that were intentionally designed to be independent levers or to be combined. We want to work with preservation. We want to work with development. We understand we don't control the market. We can't control the market. What we can do is respond to the market and and support the developers in the market who are trying to accomplish the same goals that we are. So we did that very intentionally. Council approved it, adopted it, and we have been working off that ever since. Another, for us, very important piece of this puzzle was figuring out the implementation of an affordable housing impact statement. Every time an application goes into community development, they get a voluntary document that is our affordable housing impact statement. What are you taking out? What are you putting in? What are the price points of what you're taking out? And what are your price points of what you're putting in? Now, I know we're getting this at the front end of the project. So 5 years from now, by the time we finally have a building, those numbers have changed, which is why we have it at the front end of the project. And when you come in for your certificate of occupancy, you get another pretty piece of paper asking what the numbers are now, so that we can watch that trend and see what's happening. But it also helps us to understand what is happening on a, so to speak, real-time basis with our units. When we had a small 20-unit complex being scraped so that they could build higher density condos, we knew that when they were going in for their permitting, and we were able to start taking a look at who's there, what are the incomes, what do we need to do, and what, if anything, can we do to help the folks who live there? So it definitely gives us that real-time response and approach to what we're doing and being able to maintain that. And we have massive Excel spreadsheets for that thing. Again, the nonprofit, we did make sure that it was a 501 so that it does qualify as an affiliate of the housing authority and B as a nonprofit, IRS recognized. We have structured our programming so that part of our CDBG funding is being utilized to acquire these permanently affordable rental properties, to build a base of permanently affordable units that are held in the affiliate with deed restrictions. We are acquiring land for assemblage, not always through federal dollars because they don't like that whole land assemblage thing and holding, but it allows us to acquire. It also allows us to do renovations and do some financial sustainability. Part of the intentional structure here is with our units and our dirt being held by the affiliate, it may be a nonprofit, but it's operated more like a business. We need income, we need rental revenues coming in. We have to pay operating and maintenance. We have to deal with capital maintenance. I've got to get the landscapers out there to take the weeds down on the vacant lots, or I get these really nasty grams from code compliance because my weeds are too high. But we intentionally structured, we have no profit motivation. It's part of the housing authority. I just need us to break even. So we have that in there. All of the proceeds, the entire first year, every penny that you get off rent goes into savings. So that we have that in there. We pay cash for these houses. We don't owe a debt. That goes into savings. Year 2 through 99, 20% of the net proceeds goes into savings, 80% is available so that we have that compounding income to buy more properties, to do renovations on some of these foreclosures that we buy that I need to drop $100,000 in to make them habitable units. And while we have that piece going, we're continuing to buy more properties, buy more dirt, and work on that because we understand it's the compounding impact that's really going to keep us where we need to be and give us the best chance of getting where we need to be. So just because I kind of like to show off, this is one of our renovated units. When we bought this thing, it had some water damage. There was no drywall in the interior. It was halfway busted out concrete where somebody tried to take out tile and float a floor and did a really horrible job. And we had this really ugly black mold-like substance that we couldn't quite figure out what it was, but we had to have dealt with. We were able to pick this up for very nominal fees because of the condition, because of the residual funding that we had in the nonprofit. We were able to use that to renovate the house. It is now a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, income-based workforce rental with a 4-person household at 90% of AMI paying 30% of their income. And they've been living in this unit for 2 years. And they, I think, are going to renew their lease again. But it has allowed us to do these things and really pick it up. From 18 to now, we've gone from 0 units in the affiliate to plus 60 units in the affiliate. So we've kind of hit that critical mass where we're able to actually start doing a lot more things. But that was a key component. And now that all the homework's done, now we get to the Hometown for All initiative. Because one of the biggest pieces, how do we maintain? What do we do? How do we fund these things? Where does the money come from? I can only do so many bake sales and car washes because it just generates only so much revenue. So our mayor and council have an initiative. It's launched by Mayor Corey Woods. Accelerates. One of our strategies was a dedicated funding stream, recurring, non-federal, into the affiliate to be able to do this. So what they have done is entered into an agreement with our nonprofit affiliate of the Housing Authority for the Hometown for All initiative. The city will take an equivalent to 50% of the building permit fees that come in on an annual basis, write a check to the affiliate. We have a recurring cash flow that comes in that we can use to acquire property, renovate properties, hold for assemblage, and use for leverage on future projects. We also structured it because it's got that pretty little C3 at the end. You can make voluntary donations if you would so like. And they came up with a voluntary contribution formula. So the city's put some skin in the game. We know we're getting an equivalent of 50% of the building permit fees, but your project really isn't designed for affordable or workforce. We caught you, at 4 years and 5 months, and it's really not going to make any sense to take a look at this. And you do want to support affordable housing in the city. That's great. So you're building, it's a commercial project. and your building permit fees were $600,000, well, could you do 20% if it's a residential and 10% if it's a commercial? If you can, cool. If you can't, okay. I mean, but at least we asked. It's a conversation. We do have our guidelines, that we are able to maintain so that we can work with plus or minus. That was implemented in January of 21 when we got all of that going. Let's skip a slide. Okay. I am hitting the wrong buttons. I am so sorry. So just to kind of push that a little bit more, it is very restrictive and our contract is very specific in what we can do with that money. And we do reporting to the Housing Authority Governing Board every quarter with a memo to our city council. That money can be used for the acquisition of land for assemblage, improved and unimproved properties. Buy it, hold it, wait for that larger redevelopment to come in. Acquisition of workforce rental units, 81 to 120. We're buying for the 0 to 50s to make sure there's a base of permanently affordable rental housing. We need to make sure there's a base of rental housing for our folks that make 81 to 120. So starting to work on that. Part of this, it's divided in fifths, by the way, or fourths, excuse me. Part of this gets dropped into a pot to incentivize development. When we get $1 million in cash in the bank, we will put out a NOFA that says we have $1 million available to incentivize your project to include affordable or workforce housing. Our preference is affordables, but you tell us what you can do. Nothing says it'll be $1 million to one project. It could be 2 500s, 4 250s, or 1 million. But we will have $1 million to put out to help buy down the cost of a project that is going to provide the most and longest term affordability period for affordable or workforce, and see how that works. The other is because we don't have too many restrictions on this. We have our down payment assistance program through our home funds for folks who have 80% AMI and below. We'll provide up to $35,000 in down payment assistance. Home ownership is a great option. It's not right for every family, but it's a great option if it's right for your family. So we have a down payment assistance program for families at 81 to 120% of the area median income. $35,000 grant, well, loan actually. 0 interest. If you decide to sell or refinance your house for anything less than a reduction in your interest rate, you owe us our $35,000 back so we can help out another family since you don't need that money anymore. But you just pay us back what you owe us. Deed restriction. So we were able to move this forward on that. We have an anticipated, between $2 million and $4 billion a year guaranteed income stream that's going to be coming in. Once mayor and council walked through Hometown for All, approved Hometown for All, I mean, we've been bugging people for years at this point. We need affordable housing. We need workforce housing. We need. Here's, the little pieces we as the municipality or we as the housing authority are doing. Once this made its way through council and it got broadcast, it changed the entire conversation with developers and with the development attorneys that were coming in and some of these out-of-state calls, because now the city's got skin in the game. There is $2 to $4 million a year. Since January, we have collected $6,131,000 in the Hometown for All. We have $2.4 million in cash that has been received. We have bought our first vacant lot for development. We bought our first workforce rental house. We have $2.6 million coming in from the sale of a city property. The city was kind enough to put in the affiliate. It was not appropriate for housing, but hey, I could always use cash. If anybody's got extra, we'll spend it for you. And then we have, I can't see that number, but we have our voluntary donations and pledges that have come in. But really from January to June, I don't even have a 6-month full-on period. We've got $6 million worth of cash and pledges to move that thing forward. And it started with nothing but the commitment from the city to actually put some skin and cash in the game on a recurring basis. And this is absolutely allowing us to do a lot more than we used to be able to do to maintain that blend, to move it forward, and to meet that projection for the 5 years. And I'll hush now because I saw my 5-minute paddle. I talked too much.
Thank you, Levon. That was amazing. Yeah, what an accomplishment in Tempe. Open it up for questions for Levon and Hometown for All. Again, do we have any virtual questions, Sherry?
We do. So this is related to one of the City of Phoenix initiatives, the landlord incentive. Does the landlord need to not evict the person to keep the incentive? If not, what is to prevent them from accepting the individual, get the award, evicting them, and repeating the process?
So the incentive requirement is the HAP agreement has to be in place and the resident has to be in place for 12 months, for a 12-month period. So that's the criteria of that incentive.
I have a question for Levon. Like, how in the world are you getting voluntary contributions to your fund? How is that happening?
My good looks and charming personality.
I mean, we all know it's a great thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's as projects are going through it truly is, once Hometown for All went in and the developers and development attorneys saw that the city was made that commitment, we hopped on board. They hopped on board. We've got projects coming in that were started years ago, before this even started. But as they're coming through for their final hearing and their final approvals or their COEs, they're saying, well, I can't really do this, but here's your check for $120,000. I'd like to help anyway. So it really that changed the entire conversation with that recurring funding stream and being able to say, oh, $2 million a year coming from the city, I'll take spare change. And it made that difference. We've gotten a few private citizen donations that have come in, where folks wanted to contribute to affordable housing, and again, nonprofit donations work very well for that.
Oh, wonderful. Come on up, Brad.
I think the enhanced use lease kind of strategy makes so much sense for Tempe. You're so landlocked, and Department of Defense and VA have been using that kind of model. Hopefully it's long enough that everybody in the transaction is dead by the time anybody has to care, right? But a great strategy for Tempe. Curious, when you're doing the housing analysis of the stock and determining that 50% of your units were available to 80% AMI and below, it sounds amazing offhand. I'm curious, where does student housing fall into that? And how does it, because obviously we know we've got ASU, the behemoth, and all of that housing development. How's that play into those figures? And
So projects that are specifically student housing,
Mhm.
I don't count.
okay, so those were pulled out.
Those are pulled out. This is housing that is available for everyone. Student housing is student housing.
Yeah.
We don't take that into the consideration. I don't take that into the calculation of the amount of housing that is available, because I can't move X, Y, and Z into a student housing unit if they're not student housing. So we did pull that out.
Yeah.
So if we included those, our numbers would be completely different.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just ensuring, that's not skewing it somehow. And that's pretty amazing that you got half available to 80% AMI and below without the student housing. So
We were quite impressed with that, and actually on the first inventory made them go back 3 times and said, no, I need
I
to count
would have
this.
made them go back 10 or 11. Yeah.
So, and it's with the second one, and we're in the same rough position. Okay, I think we have this approximately right. I mean, I know there are students who rent units, just out and about.
Yeah, there'd be
student
some
housing,
outliers.
but I mean, that is what it is.
Yeah.
The housing is available to folks, and so we did include it.
Pretty amazing. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more other questions, so we're going to move on to Irma Hollenby to talk about two things that usually don't happen together, or you don't hear them together, Scottsdale and affordable housing. So Irma.
Hi there, everybody. This one. Well, before I get started, I would like you to join me in really congratulating and recognize Titus and Levon and Sherry and Cindy for their courage and their grit in really moving the needle forward in affordable housing in their communities. It's really extraordinary. And so I'm really happy to be in your presence. So I know this is really tiny on the screen. But what I wanted to share with you is that it seems that the city of Scottsdale may have beat both Phoenix and Tempe to having an affordable housing plan. I found a copy of Scottsdale's Task Force for the Creation and Preservation of High Quality, Safe and Affordable Housing, led by none other than Paul Ludwig and Brian Swanton back in 1999. Are those names familiar to you or what? So my name is Irma Hollenby, and I'm with the City of Scottsdale's Community Assistance Office, where I lead our housing and community development programming. I arrived back at the City of Scottsdale back in April of 2020. And of course, being new and trying to get the lay of the land, I was reading through a lot of their historical documents, and that's when I happened across this housing plan. I don't mean to ruin the end of my story for you, but unfortunately, it did not resolve or result in a formalized commitment to affordable housing, but all is not lost. So fast forward to 2021. Scottsdale has no housing plan or strategy, and to be frank, agreement on what exactly affordable housing by definition is. We have a new mayor, and affordable housing is actually parting from his lips to our ears, which is very encouraging. And the subject of affordable housing is coming up in strategic planning sessions and council meetings, and conversations are occurring amongst executive leadership at the city, which is very thrilling for me. There's a small group of us at the City of Scottsdale who, about 10 of us from various disciplines, very similar to the groups that probably these two gentlemen led. It includes a community assistance office, planning and development, economic development, real estate, human services, police, and the city manager's office. And we've all been commissioned to further vet what affordable housing strategies might look like for the city. We've started meeting bi-weekly to discuss affordable housing and are engaging in some very basic conversations. And the truth is, sometimes these conversations as a professional houser, they're sometimes painful. And Levon alluded to this, and I'm not referring to team dynamics. I'm talking about language, because the term affordable housing conjures up something different in each one of the brilliant minds that are sitting around the table with me. So I've challenged our team to flip those words around and let us focus on housing affordability. There seems to be something visceral and different about affordable housing versus housing affordability. And when our team is on the same page, it changes and charges the conversation. And so what I leave with you with that is, or that lesson learned, is that language matters, our messaging matters. This is going to require you to be a patient teacher. The subject of housing affordability is abstract, oftentimes for those outside of our field. And as we all know, it is a very highly political, social, moral issue of our age, and it can be divisive. And when I say affordable housing to folks outside of our field, sometimes images that are conjured up are frequently old school public housing projects riddled with crime, low income housing that doesn't look like the rest of the neighborhood, that's run down or maybe built subgrade, or even it just conjures up even housing subsidies, and folks have a hard time moving beyond that. So language matters. Another observation that I have to share is that when affordable housing is brought up, homelessness is inevitably brought up. And which us practitioners know, that is a whole different animal. Sure, 100% they are related, but addressing homelessness, in my humble opinion, should have a whole plan onto itself. So in this internal working group, we easily get wrapped around the axle of what exactly we're talking about when conversations are mixed in discussing affordable housing issues or housing affordability issues and homelessness issues. So I'm finding it very necessary to be purposeful when participating in these discussions, to bifurcate the issues, and even lobbying for a separate but concurrent plan to be created to address homelessness in Scottsdale. And I offer to our team that they will find in one of their top issues will be the lack of affordable housing in Scottsdale, and that's where we'll meet again. So if we can solve the housing affordability crisis in the city of Scottsdale, then we can house more people who are struggling with homelessness. So please consider in your conversation seeking to address homelessness and housing affordability in absolutely different plans. Not having a common language is a barrier to progress, and so is not knowing your city's story. One of the things our team was missing from the beginning is data. We have oodles of observation, what we read in the newspaper, anecdotal information, but no numbers and stats. And this unfortunately, again, makes housing affordability conversations abstract to the point where we're mixing issues and we're not talking about the same things. So my advice to someone endeavoring to kick up these types of conversations in your own municipality is to really know your numbers, know the types of housing that you have, the number of units that you have, and your demographics. And not just for affordable housing, but for all housing types. People will be shocked, as maybe you were here today, when you see Phoenix's story of the delta in the number of units that was needed. And then when Tempe was telling their story about what exactly their housing mix was. It's powerful. Information is powerful. The storytelling is powerful. And it really brings home the idea about how underbuilt we are as a region in my city of Scottsdale, and how the lack of supply is causing this crisis. And not just a crisis for people who are homeless, just a crisis for people that are currently unemployed or living in poverty. Because the truth of the matter is people making $88,000 a year, which by the way is the median income of Scottsdale residents, are having difficulties. And we as a region, we didn't build enough, and we didn't build enough in the housing mix. And so I share with you that there are a number of resources that you can turn to for cursory information. Yardi Matrix is what we use at the city of Scottsdale. Some use Zillow, and Sherry turned me on to Apartment Insights. I've relied on information from my planning and development group as well as our real estate group. And so they can be a tremendous resource to you. So do your homework, or hire someone like Levon did to do your homework and figure out your city story. You can't determine where you're going to go or even sort of estimate how much this is going to cost unless you know where you are. And start these conversations with basic information about where you are. As I shared at the beginning, Scottsdale had an affordable housing plan, and now we get the fortunate benefit of hindsight. Two of the major components of the Scottsdale plan was, one, to preserve the units of affordable housing that they did have at the time, and two, to create more affordable housing. In their efforts to create more affordable housing, some very unfortunate mistakes were made, and it has soured the taste of affordable housing development for folks at the city of Scottsdale who have long memories. So I propose that we learn from the roads that we've taken and that we learn from the roads that we haven't. And we learn from others' past mistakes as well. Seek coaching and mentoring from us, your housing community. For me, this endeavor would be so much more difficult if I did not have the gentle guidance and counsel of those who have gone before me, such as Sheree over at the City of Phoenix and Titus and Levon. They have really been tremendous resources to me. It's been just amazing to know that they started out in the exact same space that we are. So I'm very encouraged that only a few years later that you are all in such a different space. And finally, I'll part with this diamond. I'm told the city sold off all of its land about 5 years ago, and not unusual for what was going on at the time. But now our city's options for development are very limited, given that we do not have the land to pony up to the development table. Just like Tempe, we are landlocked. And so I part with this. If your city has not sold off all of its affordable assets or its land, hold on to your land. Find out if the state owns any of the land in your jurisdiction. I learned from a brilliant mentor of mine that it's your greatest negotiation asset at the development table. Thank you.
Thank you, Irma. You are a model of patience and diplomacy in what you're doing. Very, very, very challenging taking that on in the city of Scottsdale. So that's why I wanted Irma to talk today. So thank you. And actually, since you mentioned it, since Tom and I came to the state, Arizona Department of Housing, we are working with the Arizona Department of Administration on all the state-owned land across the state to see what where we could put affordable housing on some of that state-owned land. So holding on to land is really, really important for all of us jurisdictions. It's a way to incentivize affordable housing by reducing land costs because everything is so costly. So thank you for that. So any questions for Irma or the whole panel? We'll open it back up. And Brad, are you going to run up here again? No. Okay. There we have the question.
Hey there, just a quick comment. I serve on the village for Alhambra, and through that process, I probably, to a fault, am always chiming about affordable housing whenever something's being developed. And the strategy I used to take was that I would ask the market rate projects that would come through my village to consider setting aside a few units for affordable housing, you know, giving them the background on the crisis we're in and stuff like that. But knowing, being in the industry, that's a lot to ask of a market rate developer. I then changed my tune once the Arizona Community Foundation came out with their Arizona Housing Fund. And then I would then start chirping in the developer's ear saying, hey, can you consider a donation to the Arizona Housing Fund in lieu of setting aside units? Because I thought that was something that was a little bit more direct and attainable for them. So to see the city of Tempe do that formally, I think is amazing. I always feel so alone chirping in these developers' ears, but to have a whole city, you know, stand behind an idea like that and with such tremendous success. I mean, nudging Titus to maybe do that in Phoenix, and how I could continue to be an advocate for affordable housing on that development side. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's so important to have advocates in the planning committees. You're a village planning committee member for Alhambra. And that is one way that all of us as housers can help with all of these initiatives, is by being involved and encouraging the right involvement from our neighbors and the rest of our community in the planning committees, and going to the planning commission and helping to approve some of these initiatives, and also the affordable housing projects that come through for zoning, because that seems to be one of the major barriers right now is zoning. Got a question?
Hi again. I'm curious, in looking at ways to speed up the development of affordable housing and simultaneously lower the costs, especially with the cost of lumber and everything else just skyrocketing. One of the things that we're looking at is 3D printing of houses. We're working with Yavapai College right now. They've got a 3D printer that can do that. I'm curious about whether any of your communities are looking at 3D printing of houses and whether that requires any changes in terms of codes or zoning or things of that sort.
Well, at least for Tempe, we have, we entered into a partnership with Habitat for Humanity a few years ago to develop some houses. And they have just not too long ago finished printing their 3D printed house on one of the lots and are starting to get the top hat and things on there. So we are looking at that. That was unfortunately a longer planning process than I think any of us would have liked, because it kind of got deemed experimental housing. When we had a discussion with HUD, well, has anybody ever lived in a 3D printed house here? Can you show us? And then when we went to planning and, code, kind of looking at that, the weight bearing, the walls, the safety issues. But we were able to work through all that. And we've got ours sitting there that we will be watching quite closely to see how that works. And then we have been working with our friends over at Habitat that we've been continuing to work with on this, looking at, the first house is always the most expensive, but comparatively, what is the differential between printing this house and doing a regular stick built on here, and start so that we can start looking at that and taking a little bit more of a thing on the 3D printed.
Good morning. Thank you for all of your comments. Seth with the City of Surprise. How do you go beyond NIMBYism in your community? So can you share some lessons learned? I know the coalition has some really good things in their plan, Housing Coalition, but can you share a little bit of your experience and how you handle that or prevent some of that? Thank you.
Well, that's a tough topic. NIMBYism is very real in Phoenix and certain parts of Phoenix. In fact, I'm dealing with an issue in a community where there's an affordable housing property currently existing where the community or some activists do not want that in their backyard. So I think going forward, as part of the Housing Phoenix plan and working with council, we have to do an education campaign. And also, like Irma said, it's educating the public about the different terms of housing and the needs. I think when you say affordable housing or low-income housing, it's got a different connotation for different people. And I think that to overcome that is going to be the big step in Phoenix. And I think we're working with council, and some of the council members do understand that, and including staff, because staff sometimes also have different definitions of affordable housing or what it looks like. So working with residents and working with the communities, I think at the local level is going to be very important to create more housing, especially for Phoenix. I'm seeing it in the last few weeks where in certain pockets of town, they're telling me, forget about it. And then we have to sit down and explain to them what this means and what it entails. I think that's a conversation that's not coming from the housing department alone, but it's entire council and the community at large to speak about it, and activists and champions in the community like yourselves to work with council and the community at large to say, hey, we need more housing for people. Otherwise, you're going to be like a community like Telluride, Colorado, where they can't get people to come and stay there or work there because housing is not affordable for anyone.
One more question.
Hello, Lisa Urias with the Arizona Community Foundation. So I also encourage contributions to the Arizona Housing Fund. My question is for Titus and Cindy. We worked years ago on the reimagining of the properties that were in South Central Phoenix and East Lake Park area that were part of the voluntary acquisition and relocation program. So a lot of homes were bought up and people were moved out as a result of Sky Harbor expansion. So I think the city of Phoenix now owns those properties. The flight path has since changed, and a lot of people in that area would love to see more residential back. So I'm wondering about whether we held on to that land and if there are any plans for some housing to go into those neighborhoods.
The answer is yes. The city did hold on to that land, and the aviation department did a large study on what could go in there. Even if they're not in the direct flight path, sometimes the land is too close to the flight path and there's noise issues and things like that. So it's all governed by, is it the FAA, very strict guidelines. So the answer is some of it can go for housing. And I think we included some of those lots as city-owned land in our Housing Phoenix plan to be RFP'd out for construction of housing. I think most of them were on Jefferson Street in the Eastlake neighborhood that you're talking about. Those were appropriate for housing. The other ones that were closer to the airport were deemed not appropriate, so they're probably going to be RFP'd out as commercial or something like that. Good question. All right, I have 11:30, so we are finished with our session. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you to our panel members today. Appreciate everything you've done.